No matter how desperately we would like to freeze a given moment in time forever, that's just not the way life works. Even for the magically inclined. But that doesn't have to be a sad thing. After all, what good are memories if we can't recall the joyful times of our past, every now and again? Every day since reaching adulthood, Henry has roamed the great many forests, woodlands, and jungles that spread and creep across our vast realm, clambering over moss-covered boulders, listening to the leaves, inspecting the earthly soil, tending to wildlife, or just observing Mother Nature at her finest. He was in his element, as it were. Being a druid, and a small one at that, he preferred this private way of life. The dark canopy and secretive insular culture of his people was comfortable. But that all changed one afternoon when he made a fateful, maybe serendipitous decision to leave the safety of the shadows and investigate a strange noise that seemed to pull at his heartstrings. Our story begins a long time ago, during a period of my realm that was wrought with tragedy, plague, and most prominently, war. Now Henry, our druidic friend, though still considered young, was well into his 70s, and well into his habitual routine of wandering amongst the greenery, when the whisper of a very entrenched bloody war traveled through the many root systems and chattering birds, bringing with it a worry that Henry felt needed to be answered. But he shook his head in dismay, for it was quite a distance from his current location, a fortnight of travel at least. Be that as it may, he would go and see for himself if anything needed to be done. Now what troubled him even more so during his travels was that instead of growing with intensity, the tidings became fewer and fewer the closer he was. Which could mean this bloodshed was coming to an end. Or the woodland of the surrounding area has become extinct, caught in the crossfire and burnt to the ground. But if that were the case, he should have felt it. Something odd has happened indeed. Henry quickened his pace. When at last he arrived at the Shallandir Wood, he was taken aback by the quiet and overall breadth of peace that was hanging in the air. This was reassuring, but he needed to know for sure. So he crept along to the very edge of the shaded tree line and peered out. At first, the piercing sunlight overtook his vision, before adjusting to rest on a serene view of rolling grassland hills and gentle zephyr-like winds playing about the overgrown valleys. This was not at all what he expected. Thankful to be sure, but where was the war that he knew had taken place? It was as if nothing had touched this land in ages save for Mother Nature's grace. Henry stroked his mustache and was about to turn back to the forest to ponder this mystery when a distant sound perked his sensitive ears. It was a sort of chirrup, or maybe a peep. Definitely a faint bird-like cry of distress coming from somewhere over those hills. Henry bit his lip. He knew it was best to leave animals be, but What if this was man-made trouble? He looked back to the dark, inviting woods, then heard the chirps again, and despite his better judgment, stepped out from the safety of the trees to investigate. Coming to the fulcrum of one of these hills, Henry waded through the tall grass and paused as he looked out. There, on just another hilltop, sat a rather large, lonely, broken stone. Which wasn't necessarily out of place, but what was the oddly short grass that encircled this boulder. And there, hiding in the shadows of it, were 3 canary yellow baby hens. Chicks, but no mother to be seen as they continuously chirped away. Now, being a man of the wild, Henry often thought it best to let nature take its course in these sorts of circumstances. One does not always know why a mother leaves its children behind, but something else was pulling at him, diverting his logic to emotions as he found himself walking their way, then coming to stoop over the 3 loud little babies, who by all right should have ran in fear, but instead tilted their heads to look up at this bearded gnome, then waddled over to lean into his boot, rubbing their beaks back and forth across the sole, now quietly peeping in what he could only describe as a shared moment of trust. He remembered a pouch on his belt that was often littered with varying things from the woods. In this case, an assortment of soft grass and seeds that he was able to offer the chicks, which they greedily and happily gobbled up before hopping off and around the area, apparently feeling rather content now. Meanwhile, Henry made a small shelter from old sticks and straw within the crack of the boulder, so the little hens had somewhere to nest that was out of harm's way, because he knew he couldn't be there around the clock. There was always something else that needed tending to, but he would not stray far. He felt attached now in one way or the other, and was determined to help them along as best he could, without intervening more so than he already has. For now, at least, he would stay the night in the woods, then come back in the morning to check on them. You never know, he thought, their mother could return. And for a while, this is the way it went for a magical spell of time. Henry would walk to the top of that first hill to see the 3 chicks waiting in anticipation. They would break out in loud, excited peeps at the sight of him as he smiled and clambered down to greet them, offer some little snacks from the forest, inspect their nesting, and sometimes he would sit and tell them a story. The stories in particular seemed to deeply engross the chicks for one reason or another, and Henry took great delight in that. On one visit, he took note of how quickly they were starting to grow, and of the plumage that was beginning to sprout along their wings, which was rose in color. Now that's interesting, he thought. Though nothing was ordinary about this entire ordeal, he reminded himself. And then he felt a small pang of sadness down in his stomach. But he was glad to see them getting closer to maturity, and hopefully fending for themselves nonetheless. But as time went on, the days turned into weeks, and our dear Henry found himself a bit more distracted than usual while on his walks. The forest life was very busy at the moment, and, well, it was a little longer than usual before his next visit, as time had gotten away from him. But this go-round, when he reached the top of the hill to see the stone and anticipating hens, he saw something else. Something different. There were people there now. a small greenish old man, a few others, and his chickens, now fully grown, 2 of which seemed to be playing and frolicking with one of the visitors, and the third had made a small nest atop the boulder. She was facing in his direction. Henry wasn't sure how to feel, but that pang of sadness returned. This time, however, it was marked with a touch of happiness. He knew he would not be returning here again. And the memories he made he would always keep, and, well, the forest, at least the forest would always have need of him.